you doing? What are you talking broken English for?
I thought they could understand me better.
No, sit down.
Talk broken English and cinematography, stay in mind. Welcome to the class, you learn the art of dealing, history of making broken English and math.
Welcome to Broken English Films Podcast. Bienvenido al podcast de películas de inglés quebrado.
So if you've spoken to me over the past God knows how many years, you'll know that one of the ways that I want to bring people more into the world of what I've created is by actually explaining to them the thoughts behind it and then allowing them to decide whether they do or don't like the art by itself. Well, what I didn't really anticipate was how big AI would become. Now, a lot of people are fearful of this, and in some ways maybe I am, but I found this particular version, which is an interpretation by Google of my work, to be really interesting, because I included in it both some of the notes, again not everything, and the screenplay and the story itself, to see what it came up with and how it reacted, and of course, whatever the algorithm did, whatever the AI did in terms of ripping it apart, dissecting it, deducing what's what with it, this was what it ended up coming up with. So, without further ado, these are two characters, AI-generated characters, having a conversation about the screenplay, which the AI has read, and the notes, which again the AI has read, interpreting things to do with Hugo Lunny's Castigation story. Enjoy or don't. I hope you do that.
All right, folks, buckle up for this one.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're diving deep into a film script called Castigation, and let me tell you, the title is just a taste of the unsettling stuff to come.
Right.
This story takes place in Cheyenne, Wyoming, so picture this. Rodeos, wide open spaces, that whole classic small town vibe.
Yeah.
But just below the surface, there's this darkness brewing, and we're going to unpack it all, piece by piece.
Like peeling back the layers of an onion, but way creepier, you know?
Exactly. And the story really gets going with our main character, Baraka.
This guy.
We first meet him as a kid in Hoback, Wyoming, where he goes through this early trauma. His brother James dies.
Oh, wow.
And his reaction, it's strange. He asks James went to McDonald's and if he can go too.
Huh.
I mean, it's heartbreaking, sure, but also kind of chilling, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Makes you wonder if it's like a sign of something deeper going on in his head.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Well, it definitely foreshadows the dark stuff that's coming later on. The script doesn't come right out and diagnose him, but it drops these little hints, you know?
Right.
Suggests a pretty messed up mind.
Yeah.
Like later, as a teen in Cheyenne, he starts playing these cruel pranks on people.
Oh, really?
Then there's that scene where he hits a deer with his car and just leaves it there for a mountain lion to eat.
Oh my God.
It's like he's totally disconnected from other people's pain, almost fascinated by death.
Whoa.
Yeah, pretty disturbing.
And that detachment, it seems to stick with him into adulthood too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Baraka cultivates this very specific look, always decked out in cowboy gear, concealed knife in his boot, and this massive set of keys hanging from his belt. It's like almost theatrical.
Right.
Like he's consciously playing a part, you know?
Totally agree. Like he's created this persona,
Yeah.
this facade, like the classic cowboy.
Yeah.
And that facade, it becomes even more, I don't know, jarring, I guess.
Right.
When we learn about his double life.
Oh, double life.
Because on the surface, Baraka seems like, I don't know, Mr. Respectable Citizen.
Right.
Steady job at Knight's grocery store, devout churchgoer, loving fiancé to Jenna,
Right.
friendly with neighbors, chats with his coworkers.
Seems normal enough.
The kind of guy you'd never suspect of anything, well, sinister.
And yet, under all that, he's running this seriously messed up operation.
Oh, yeah,
This is where the story takes a hard left turn into creepy town.
for sure.
Baraka's abducting people he considers sinners,
Oh, wow.
killing them, and then, get this, processing their bodies and selling the meat disguised as jackalope.
Jackalope.
All right. He's got hidden rooms in his house, special equipment, meticulous records of his victims and customers.
Wow.
It's absolutely horrifying, but there's also this chilling efficiency to it, like a twisted business, you know?
It's that methodical approach that makes it so unsettling.
Yeah.
Like, he's not just some rage-fueled killer. He's built this whole system to justify his actions
Right.
and profit from them, too.
Yeah.
Makes you think about the nature of evil, like, is it always chaotic? Or can it be cold, calculated, even disturbingly efficient, like you said?
And to make things even creepier, He's not alone in this whole thing.
Oh, no.
His fiancée, Jenna, is deeply involved.
Really?
In the beginning, she comes across as this innocent, devout woman, completely in love with Baraka.
Right.
But as the story goes on, we see her taking on a way more active role in the whole thing.
Huh.
Jenna's transformation is one of the most fascinating parts of this whole script. On the surface, she seems to embody traditional values. She's religious, committed to her fiancé, uncomfortable with premarital intimacy.
Okay, yeah.
But underneath all that, there's this darkness that comes out as she gets more involved in Baraka's awful acts. She helps lure victims, assists with, well, processing the bodies, even seems to enjoy the fruits of their labor, if you get what I mean. It's a fascinating look at how someone can reconcile these seemingly opposite beliefs. And what's also striking is how diverse Baraka's victims are. He targets people from all walks of life. We have a rude TSA agent, a flirty student couple, a disrespectful store clerk, even a group of bullying teenagers.
Wow. So he's not discriminating.
Nope, it's like he's created his own twisted system of justice, punishing those he sees as transgressors.
Interesting. Like he's targeting different parts of Cheyenne society.
Right.
Highlighting the flaws he sees in others.
While remaining totally blind to his own messed up actions.
Exactly. And the violence gets worse as the script goes on. Starts with intimidation, minor injuries, but quickly escalates to brutal killings and elaborate torture scenes.
That's awful.
There's one detail that's particularly chilling. Baraka uses laminated Bibles for his victims
What?
and then cleans them for reuse. What do you make of that?
I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, it's tough, right?
It's like he's trying to twist religion, using it to justify his actions, but at the same time, there's this sense of hypocrisy, this disconnect between his supposed faith and the terrible things he's doing.
Totally. It raises questions about how faith can be manipulated, how religious beliefs can be twisted to serve personal agendas, even justify violence.
And that brings us to the whole jackalope deception.
Yes.
Which is another layer of messed up ingenuity in Baraka's whole operation.
Tell me more.
So he's playing on this local legend.
Okay.
This mythical creature, a rabbit with antlers that's super ingrained in the folklore of the American West.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
And he manages to pass off human meat as this rare delicacy.
You're kidding.
It's sold as jerky, steaks, burgers, even sushi. And the irony is, people rave about the unique taste, completely unaware of what they're actually eating.
Oh, that's just messed up on so many levels.
He's built this whole business empire on lies and brutality.
People are so obsessed with consuming, with experiencing the exotic, they don't even question where their food comes from.
The ethical implications, all of it.
Exactly.
And as the demand for jackalope grows, Baraka even considers exporting internationally, expanding his reach and deepening the deception even more.
Wow, so it's not just a local thing anymore.
Nope. Things get even darker when we meet another group of characters, the wedding planners. Chicago, Christo, Francesca, and Farouk.
Okay.
They have a car accident that delays the wedding, and for some reason, this sets Baraka off.
It seems like any little change to his plans, just sets him off.
Right.
Like he thinks he's upholding some divine order. And their accident, well, it leads them right into his trap. Their disbelief, it quickly turns into a fight for their lives.
That's intense.
And the psychological portrait, it's just awful. They're not just prisoners, they're forced to take part in his twisted rituals.
Oh, God.
The script doesn't hold back on the details, makes you really face the horror of what's happening. And now he's inflicted that same pain on others, creating this legacy of suffering that seems destined to repeat itself.
It's heavy. What do you think this story tells us about, good and evil?
That's a big one.
Is it something we're born with, or is it, shaped by what happens to us?
Our choices, the stuff we carry with us.
The trauma.
It's a question without an easy answer.
Right.
But what's so interesting about Castigation, it doesn't give us easy answers or judge, really.
Yeah.
It just shows these complicated characters
Stuck in their own mess.
and makes us think about what drives them, the choices they make, and what happens because of those choices.
It really makes you think about the line between faith and delusion, too,
Oh, absolutely.
Can someone really think they're doing good while doing such horrible things?
Or is it all just a way to, justify the darkness inside them?
Exactly.
It's scary to think about.
It is, and the script doesn't let us off the hook either.
How so?
With that whole jackalope thing, it kind of pulls us in as the audience into this cycle of violence and consumption.
Oh, I see what you mean.
The people in Cheyenne, they have no idea what they're eating.
Right.
It's like a reflection of how we can be so willing to ignore where things come from.
The systems that produce them, even when they're messed up.
It's a dark mirror showing us that uncomfortable truth, that we're often part of systems that cause suffering.
Even if we don't want to admit it.
Castigation is a really unsettling story, but it also makes you think a lot.
It does, yeah.
What are some of the big takeaways you think people should consider after this deep dive?
For me, it's how the script explores hypocrisy, especially when it comes to faith and morality.
Yeah.
Baraka believes he's this righteous guy doing God's work,
Right.
but his actions, they're anything but.
Totally.
Makes you wonder how easily belief can be twisted to justify violence.
And how we all have that potential for darkness.
No matter how we look on the outside or what we say we believe.
It's a powerful reminder that evil can hide in plain sight,
Absolutely.
disguised as normal, even good.
It reminds us that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we know, the ones who are part of our everyday lives.
So as we come back up from this deep dive into Castigation,
Back to the surface.
we're left with a lot to process.
Yeah.
Unsettling truths, tough moral questions, things that stay with you.
It sticks with you.
It's a story that forces us to face our own darkness, to question what we believe, and to think about the consequences of our choices.
For sure.
What do you think was the most disturbing part of this whole script?
It's hard to choose. It's full of disturbing stuff.
That's true.
But for me, it's how Castigation builds suspense and uses these unsettling images.
It really gets under your skin.
Leaves you feeling uneasy, like the darkness it explores isn't just in the story.
Right.
It reflects something deeper, something kind of unsettling about human nature.
And with that chilling thought, we'll leave you to ponder the world of Castigation.
Let those wheels turn.
We'd love to hear what you think about this unsettling tale, so share your reactions and insights with us.
Yeah, let's chat.
Until next time, keep diving deep and be careful what you consume, both literally and figuratively.
Wise words.
So what you've just heard was the AI talking about the actual story itself. It read the story and it took its different interpretations and spoke about that. Then it was also one where I fed the AI some notes that I'd made, and it described it as text outlining a horror story treatment centered around Baraka and Jenna, a cannibalistic couple. The narrative details their gruesome crimes, including kidnapping, torture, and the preparation of human flesh for consumption, often presented as culinary creations. Various plot points are suggested, such as police investigations, the couple's motivations and relationship dynamics, and the perspectives of their victims. The story's tone shifts between serious horror and dark comedy, exploring themes of violence, revenge, and the macabre. Multiple characters and potential scenes are described, building towards a complex and disturbing narrative. So it got that very right. That is exactly what the writing process includes: the notes, the thoughts, the development, and the rest of it. And yeah, in case you didn't know, Castigation is a story that takes place in Cheyenne, Wyoming, revolving around Baraka Commerce. There will be a follow-up podcast in which I actively discuss things and delve into the different parts. But you can listen to the AI now if you wish. And you actually already have, so there.
All right, so get ready because this deep dive is going to be pretty unique.
Yeah.
You guys sent us a bunch of notes and excerpts. Looks like the groundwork for some kind of horror story. And let me tell you, this one is intense.
Oh, wow.
We're talking about cannibalism
Oh.
and just the ideas behind it. It's really something else.
I've got to say, it's fascinating to me, to get this kind of raw glimpse into the author's creative process, right? It's
Yeah.
not some polished prose or anything. It's really just a jumble of, like, character sketches and plot points and, well, some pretty graphic details, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, we're peeking right into their mind
Yeah.
as these, really dark and complex concepts
Yeah.
start to take shape.
It's really something, isn't it?
It is.
And at the heart of this whole twisted world is Baraka,
Okay.
our main character. Even his name kind of hints at what's to come.
Oh, really?
Apparently the author was a big Mortal Kombat fan, and the character Baraka. Well, let's just say his look left an impression.
It's amazing to me how those like little random bits of pop culture
Yeah.
can actually spark an idea like that, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, Baraka, it just instantly sets a tone. It suggests violence,
Yeah.
kind of primal aggression,
Right.
maybe even something otherworldly.
And Baraka definitely lives up to that name.
Okay.
He's described as being deeply religious,
Yeah.
almost devout, but also he's a brutal cannibal who believes that he's delivering, some twisted form of justice.
Oh, wow.
He punishes people for being rude or, what he sees as sinful.
Okay.
And then get this. He meticulously prepares their flesh for consumption.
The notes even compare his methods to like techniques of butchers and chefs.
Oh, wow.
It's a pretty chilling contrast, isn't it? This meticulousness, usually associated with chefs or artisans, takes on a horrific new meaning when applied to cannibalism. It speaks to the author's attempt to make the monstrous somehow relatable, perhaps forcing us to question our own fascination with food and preparation.
It makes you wonder what the author's trying to say about our own relationship with food, right?
Yeah.
We have all these rituals and traditions around preparing and consuming meals, but taken to this extreme, it becomes something truly horrifying.
Right.
And then we meet Baraka's girlfriend, Jenna.
Okay.
She's his accomplice. And if this is even possible, maybe even more sadistic than he is, she seems to really get off on tormenting their victims. But here's where things get really interesting. Their relationship isn't all that stable.
The notes hint at tension. Jenna gets annoyed with the messiness of using human victims, which makes you wonder, how sustainable is a relationship built on shared cruelty? What happens when those tastes diverge, even a little?
That's a great point. I mean, their home base is a seemingly normal house, but has this hidden room for holding victims and, getting them ready for their gruesome end. And they call their specialty jackalope sushi, which is just...
Jackalope sushi.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say to that.
The jackalope, this mythical creature being used to mask cannibalism, could suggest a commentary on how we disguise unpleasant truths, even to ourselves. How much of what we consume, information or otherwise, is presented under a deceptive label.
And they actually feed their victims certain things to supposedly enhance their flavor. It's disturbingly calculated.
It really emphasizes the level of control Baraka wants, even after death. It's dehumanizing, reducing people to ingredients in his twisted culinary experiment.
It's interesting because the ways they choose their victims are almost believable, which makes it even creepier.
Really?
Baraka often targets people who are even slightly rude to him, while Jenna uses her looks to lure in unsuspecting men. And sometimes they work together to set up situations and abduct couples.
It's unsettling because it highlights how vulnerable we all are in everyday interactions. You never know who you might encounter. And the idea that simple rudeness could make you a target. That's a disturbing thought.
Absolutely. Then there are these little details scattered throughout the notes that are just bone-chilling.
Like what?
Baraka pretending to sharpen a knife to scare a victim, using super glue to close wounds, collecting blood from butchers.
Oh, wow.
And then there's this bizarre detail about them having a trained cat that goes outside to use the bathroom.
Wait, a trained cat that defecates outside.
Yeah.
Is the author trying to tell us something about control and order, even within this chaotic world?
That's a good question, because it does seem intentional, even if we don't quite understand the reason yet. And then there's that jackalope thing, which keeps popping up. It feels like it's going to be more than just some creepy menu item.
I think you're right. The jackalope could symbolize something deeper, like the deceptive nature of appearances, or maybe even that blurry line between fantasy and reality.
It really makes you think about how we consume stories, how we take in information.
Right.
Are we really getting the whole picture, or just some carefully constructed version?
That's an interesting connection. It speaks to the power of storytelling, how easily we can be misled, just like those police officers who unknowingly eat jackalope.
That scene, by the way, is one I can't wait to dig into more. But before we get there, let's talk about some of the other characters the authors created. There's Jenna's sister, Angela, who's surprisingly supportive of the couple, even though she doesn't seem to know the full extent of their crimes. And then we have this group of friends, Francesca, Chicago, Farouk, and Christo, who feel like they're going to be Baraka and Jenna's main targets, maybe even the protagonists of this story.
Their presence certainly creates a lot of possibilities. It sets the stage for potential betrayals, shifting alliances, and the classic struggle of good versus evil. And it makes you wonder, will their individual vulnerabilities be exploited, or will they find strength in their connection to one another?
especially since they'll be going up against Baraka and Jenna, who seem to have a talent for finding and exploiting weaknesses.
Right.
And then there's Burl, who is completely fixated on his ex-girlfriend Angela. He seems like a bit of a wild card.
His obsession with Angela could definitely make him a dangerous character for himself and everyone around him. And we don't yet know how he'll fit into the larger story, but his presence is sure to have some unforeseen consequences.
Okay, so now we're getting to the good stuff, the potential plot points. We already mentioned the police officers unknowingly eating human meat disguised as jackalope, which is just, wow. But there's also the possibility of a hostage situation with the captives trying to escape from that hidden room. And hold on to your hats, because the notes suggest that Jenna might actually break up with Baraka, and if that happens, he's definitely going to take revenge on her new love interest.
It sounds like things could get very messy very quickly. Those potential plot points offer glimpses into possible storylines. We see the potential for both external conflicts with the victims fighting to survive and internal conflicts as loyalty is tested and relationships fracture.
It really makes you wonder who will survive and what state they'll be in when it's all over. You know, thinking about this, the hidden room element really resonates. It's like a metaphor for the darkness that can exist just beneath the surface of everyday life. Does that connect with anything else you're seeing in these notes?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The hidden room, the jackalope disguise, even Baraka's meticulous preparation. It's all about presenting a facade, masking a horrifying reality beneath something that seems totally normal.
Right.
It makes you think, like, how often are we missing what's truly going on around us?
That's a chilling thought, isn't it? And it brings us back to Baraka and Jenna's relationship, which, again, feels like another layer of this facade.
Yeah.
They're united in their cruelty, but there's also that push and pull between them that we talked about.
Exactly. And remember how Jenna sees the human victims as messy, almost inconvenient?
Right.
It's like she prefers a more controlled kind of sadism, I guess.
Right. And there are even hints that, she might be attracted to some of their male victims, which just adds fuel to that fire.
It definitely raises the possibility of jealousy and betrayal. That's classic crime drama territory, partners turning on each other.
Totally. And speaking of betrayal, we have Jenna's sister, Angela. She seems to support Jenna's relationship with Baraka, but it's unclear if she knows the truth about what they're doing.
Angela's ignorance kind of makes her a fascinating character.
Yeah.
Is she willfully blind to her sister's darker side?
Right.
Or is she simply naive and trusting?
Yeah.
And how would she react if she ever found out?
It's a huge question mark. And it could go in so many different directions. Would she turn them in? Would she somehow become complicit in their crimes? I mean, talk about a family dinner you wouldn't want to attend.
That's a darkly humorous way to put it. But it does make you think about the complexities of family loyalty. How far we're willing to go, to protect those we love.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the group of friends, Francesca, Chicago, Farouk, and Christo. They seem pretty, typical at first glance, but the notes hint that they're each dealing with their own personal struggles.
Like Francesca, for example. She's a former teacher who left her job because of all the bureaucracy and red tape. It suggests a sense of disillusionment, maybe a yearning for something more meaningful,
And then there's Chicago. She's always got an excuse for getting out of situations, which makes me think she might be running from something, maybe even a past she'd rather keep hidden.
It definitely hints at a hidden past. Or a secret that she's desperate to keep buried.
Right.
And that makes her vulnerable, doesn't it? Especially when you consider the kind of predators Baraka and Jenna are.
That's true. They seem to be drawn to weakness, like sharks smelling blood in the water. And then you have Farouk, who's described as being overly friendly and welcoming, almost to a fault.
Oh, wow. His kindness could make him an easy target, particularly for someone like Baraka, who seems to view any perceived slight as justification for his actions.
It's interesting to think about how those contrasting personalities, Francesca's disillusionment, Chicago's evasiveness, Farouk's almost naive openness, might play out in a hostage situation.
Absolutely. Will they band together and fight back?
Right.
Will their differences become strengths?
Yeah.
Or will Baraka and Jenna exploit those differences to turn them against each other?
And we can't forget about Christo, who's apparently very different from who he used to be.
That suggests some kind of transformation, a journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
But the question is, has this change made him stronger or more vulnerable?
Right.
And how will that impact his ability to survive in this, terrifying situation?
You brought up some really great points. The notes definitely suggest there's a lot going on beneath the surface with this group of friends. I'm really curious to see how they'll react when they come face to face with the horrors that Baraka and Jenna have planned.
Me too. It's a classic horror trope, right? The group of unsuspecting victims facing off against a seemingly unstoppable evil.
Yeah.
But the notes also hinted something more nuanced, a deeper exploration of these characters and their individual journeys.
Okay, and before we move on, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. Jenna potentially betraying Baraka.
Right.
What are your thoughts on how that might play out?
Well, the notes suggest, she may be tiring of Baraka's methods. Or maybe she's even looking for something more than just their shared cruelty.
Right.
And you mentioned the possibility of her being attracted to one of the male captives.
Right.
It's like a powder keg just waiting to explode.
Exactly. And we know Baraka is not going to take that lying down. He strikes me as the jealous type, to put it mildly.
Understatement of the year. His reaction would likely be brutal.
Yeah.
The question is, would Jenna try to protect her new love interest? And would she even stand a chance against Baraka's rage?
And how would that impact their victims? Would Jenna's betrayal create an opportunity for them to escape? Or would it simply shift the power dynamic, leaving them at the mercy of a new, potentially even more volatile tormentor?
It's a fascinating scenario with a lot of potential for dramatic twists and turns. And it speaks to the unpredictability of human nature, even in the face of unimaginable horror.
Speaking of horror, let's talk about the setting. The notes mention that both Baraka and Jenna are from Hoback, Wyoming, but they eventually moved to Cheyenne.
Oh, okay. Wyoming, with its rugged landscapes and frontier history, provides a stark backdrop for this story, I think. It's a place that can feel both beautiful and unforgiving, a place where darkness can easily hide.
And the fact that they both relocated to Cheyenne suggests a shared history, maybe even a traumatic event that connects them to that place.
It adds another layer of mystery to their relationship and their motivations. What happened in Hoback, that shaped them into the monsters they've become.
I'm also really drawn to the description of that hidden room where they keep their victims.
Yeah.
It's accessible through a secret door, and it's where they prepare that horrifying jackalope sushi.
The hidden room symbolizes the darkness lurking beneath the surface of normalcy. It's where Baraka and Jenna can indulge their darkest desires, hidden from the prying eyes of society. And the jackalope sushi itself adds a layer of perverse culinary ritual to their crimes, turning cannibalism into a twisted art form.
It's like they're playing with fire, trying to maintain control over something that's inherently chaotic and destructive.
Right.
And the idea of the captives plotting their escape, knowing that they're being watched and listened to, it's just terrifying.
It creates this constant sense of tension and dread, knowing that every move could be their last.
Yeah.
It also raises the question, are Baraka and Jenna deliberately letting them plan, seeing it as some sort of twisted game, a way to further torment them?
It's a chilling thought, and it speaks to the level of psychological manipulation at play here.
Right. It goes beyond physical violence. It's about breaking down their victims' spirits, making them feel completely powerless.
Okay, I have to ask about this scene where those police officers unknowingly eat the jackalope sushi. It feels like it could be like a turning point in the story.
Absolutely. If they discover the truth, it could lead to an investigation that puts Baraka and Jenna in serious danger. The question is, how would they react? Would they try to cover their tracks, or would they become even more reckless, almost daring the authorities to catch them?
It's interesting to think about how that discovery might play out. Would it be a gradual realization, or would it be a sudden, shocking moment of truth? I can just imagine the expressions on their faces.
And what about the psychological impact? Imagine the guilt, the disgust, the realization that they've been complicit in something so horrific.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, I want to talk about some of the more specific details that stood out to me in the notes, like Baraka miming sharpening a knife to intimidate his victims. It's such a simple gesture, but so effective.
It's psychological warfare, preying on their primal fears. It's a reminder that they're utterly at his mercy.
And then there's that weird detail about him using super glue to close wounds. What do you make of that?
It's like he's trying to maintain a semblance of order, of control, even as he's literally tearing people apart.
And remember that trained cat that goes outside to use the bathroom? It's such a random detail, but it feels significant somehow.
It emphasizes how Baraka and Jenna have created their own bizarre world, one that operates according to its own twisted rules. They've taken something as natural as a cat's instinct and warped it to fit their distorted reality.
You know, as horrific as their actions are, I have to admit, I'm strangely drawn to these characters.
Yeah.
They're so morally reprehensible, but there's something about their complexity, their twisted dynamic that keeps me wanting to know more.
I understand that. The author has created characters who are both repulsive and compelling. They're villains, yes, but they're also deeply human, driven by their own motivations and desires, however twisted those may be.
And the fact that they seem to genuinely believe they're doing something righteous, even as they're committing these horrific acts, just adds another layer of complexity.
It really raises questions about the form of morality and the justifications we use to rationalize our actions.
It's like they've completely rewritten the rules of right and wrong to fit their own twisted worldview. And then there's the theme of consumption. But I think it speaks to the power of horror as a genre. It allows us to explore these dark and uncomfortable truths in a way that's both terrifying and thought-provoking. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the characters, the setting, the plot points, and the unsettling themes that weave through these intriguing notes.
And we've seen how the author skillfully blends elements of dark humor and social commentary into this chilling narrative.
But what really stands out to you? What kind of story do you see emerging from all of this?
To me, this feels like it could be a film that's both terrifying and thought-provoking. A blend of horror and social commentary that would stay with you, long after the credits roll. What about you?
I'm with you on that. I'm imagining a film that's visually stunning, but also deeply unsettling, the kind of movie that gets under your skin and makes you question everything you thought you knew.
Even in these raw notes, we see the potential for something truly impactful, something that forces us to confront the darkness that exists within ourselves and the world around us.
And that brings us to those intriguing plot points that we mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Let's dig into those and see where they might lead us in a fully realized story. All right, so let's dive into those plot points. We've got the police officers unknowingly eating human meat, a potential hostage situation, Jenna maybe turning on Baraka. It's all pretty intense.
It really is. And each of those scenarios offers so much possibility for exploring the themes we've already talked about. Deception, control, the fragility of trust. Where should we start?
Let's talk about the police officers and the jackalope sushi. That feels like a real pivotal moment. A collision of the mundane world with Baraka and Jenna's horrifying reality.
I agree. It's kind of darkly comedic on the surface.
Yeah.
Cops unknowingly consuming human flesh. But it speaks to how easily we can be fooled. And the fallout from that discovery, if it happens, would be huge.
Just imagine those officers realizing what they've consumed. The psychological impact alone would be massive. And then there's the question of, how they would react.
Yeah.
Would they immediately launch an investigation? Or would their initial response be disbelief? Denial even.
Yeah, I think there's potential for a lot of internal conflict there. They're supposed to uphold the law, right?
Right.
But how do you even begin to process something like this? How do you explain it to the public without causing mass panic?
It's a story in itself, isn't it? The investigators, the media, the public, all trying to grapple with the reality of this hidden world, this horrifying secret that's been exposed.
Yeah.
And then there's the potential impact on Baraka and Jenna. They've been operating under the radar for so long, this could change everything.
Yep. Exactly. It's a direct threat to their carefully constructed facade. Would they try to cover their tracks, disappear into the shadows?
Yeah.
Or would they double down, become even more reckless? It's hard to say, but knowing their personalities, I wouldn't be surprised if they saw it as like a challenge,
Right.
A game to outsmart the authorities.
And, imagine how they might manipulate the situation to their advantage. They're already masters of deception. They could easily twist the narrative, cast doubt on the evidence, maybe even turn suspicion onto someone else.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
The idea that they could not only get away with their crimes,
Right.
but actually use the investigation to further their own twisted agenda. And then you have the potential hostage situation,
Yeah.
which is another powder keg waiting to explode.
That hidden room where they keep their victims captive becomes a pressure cooker of fear and desperation. It's a classic horror setup, but the notes hint that the author might be going for something more complex, more psychologically driven.
You mentioned earlier how the victims are being watched and listened to,
right.
which adds a whole layer of paranoia and mistrust to the situation.
Yeah.
They can't even talk freely, can't strategize. without the fear of their captors knowing their every move.
Right, and then there's the possibility that, they might turn on each other. Desperate people do desperate things.
Yeah,
And in a situation like this, even the strongest bonds can be broken.
absolutely. It's that classic question of survival.
Right.
Do you look out for yourself,
Yeah.
or do you risk your own life to help others? And how do you even begin to make those kinds of choices when you're facing unimaginable horror?
It's interesting to think about how the different personalities within the group might clash in a situation like this.
Yeah.
We've got Francesca, who's disillusioned with the world. Chicago, who seems to be running from her past. Farouk, who's almost too trusting. And Christo, who's, gone through some kind of personal transformation. It's a recipe for conflict, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And that conflict could be their undoing, or it could be the key to their survival.
Right.
Imagine if their individual strengths, their unique perspectives somehow come together, allowing them to outsmart their captors and escape.
It would be a truly David and Goliath moment, wouldn't it? A group of ordinary people overcoming incredible odds to defeat a seemingly unstoppable evil. And then there's Jenna. The idea of her betraying Barack, it's both fascinating and terrifying.
I think it speaks to the fact that even within this incredibly dark and twisted relationship, there's still potential for change,
Right.
for evolution. Jenna's growing discomfort with Baraka's methods, maybe even her attraction to one of the male captives, it's all building towards a breaking point.
And when that breaking point comes, the fallout is going to be massive. We know Baraka is capable of extreme violence.
Right.
And the thought of him feeling betrayed by the one person he seems to trust, well, it doesn't bode well for anyone.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
And it raises so many questions. Would Jenna's betrayal be a calculated move, a way to escape the horrors she's helped create?
Yeah.
Or would it be an act of desperation? A last-ditch effort to save herself and maybe even some of the victims.
And what about the victims themselves? Would they trust her? Knowing her history, would they even want her help? It's a moral dilemma with no easy answers.
Exactly, and it speaks to the complexity of human nature, how even in the face of extreme evil, there's still the possibility for redemption,
Right.
for compassion, for making difficult choices that could have, life or death consequences.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential for betrayal, for escape, for the authorities getting involved. But the notes also suggest two very different endings, for this story.
Yeah.
What if the story ends on an ambiguous note, leaving us to ponder the fate of the characters and the implications of the events that have unfolded?
That would be a bold choice.
Mm-hmm.
But also incredibly powerful. It would leave the audience with a sense of unease, of lingering dread.
Yeah.
And it would force us to confront the fact that there are no easy answers, no clear-cut resolutions to the complexities of human nature
Right.
and the darkness that exists within us all.
I'm starting to think this story is about so much more than just cannibalism and horror, It's a reflection of ourselves, our fears, our societal anxieties, and the monsters we create, both literally and figuratively.
And it reminds us that the line between good and evil, between victim and perpetrator, is often more blurred than we'd like to believe.
It's heavy stuff, for sure, but it's also what makes these notes so fascinating. They're not just entertainment, they're a challenge, a provocation. A reminder that even in the darkest corners of our imagination, there are truths to be found.
We've seen the author play with ideas of consumption, deception, and the blurred lines between monstrosity and humanity.
Yeah.
But what's most intriguing to me is the potential for the story to make us, the audience, complicit. How would you feel knowing you were consuming a carefully crafted narrative built on such darkness?
Mm-hmm.
Would it change your perspective on the stories we choose to tell?
Right.
And the stories we choose to believe? That's something to ponder.
That's a great question, and one that I'm sure will stay with me long after we finish this deep dive. We've explored the characters, the setting, the themes, and those potential plot points. But ultimately, the story is still being written. It's up to each of us to imagine how it unfolds, how those threads of darkness and light intertwine, and what truths we choose to take away from this unsettling journey into the heart of human nature.